pleasure to be here, and we have limited time, so I want to just get right into it. And we'll have a question for each of our panelists that is centered on, the challenges of today, and then I'd like to jump to the future and get their kind of advice on what they see for the future. So Jackson, I'm going to start with you. Salesforce Ventures has been established for quite some time, since it started around 2009. And I'm sure along the journey, you guys have found some ways that, what are some successful ingredients that are needed to set up a diversity initiative, and what's kind of worked for you?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Sonal, and really excited to be here today. And I guess just to kind of look back at kind of the history here at Salesforce specifically. I mean, Mark Benioff is a very vocal leader in a whole bunch of circles. I think, part of the reason why I originally joined Salesforce 4 years ago is kind of some of the values that he stands on, and one of those values is equality. And I think when you look at across our leadership team here at Salesforce. With everything that has gone on this past year and our ability to, kind of stand up an equality task force to lead a number of initiatives, and even over the course of the past years here at Salesforce Ventures, and how we've thought about investing in more diverse founders, both from a gender as well as from a racial perspective. I think it's something that, is kind of deep in the DNA at Salesforce, just given that core value. And I think that kind of leads, with some of the work that and initiatives that we've done here on our team at Salesforce Ventures specifically, how we look to work with partners, as well as, our intentional commitment to, $100 million to invest in more founders of color, specifically targeting Black and Latinx founders. We've been investing out of that for more than a year now. And so, there's a whole, it's not something that has, sort of like a light switch on and off. It's something that's, been a part of our DNA. And I think, really gives, there's a lot of, sort of kind of values that are associated with some of our initiatives and kind of how we go about investing.
That's great. I mean, I think that's so true about kind of a dedicated focus and embedding it into everything you do versus it being kind of a, side effort. And I think this ties, Jason, to some of your philosophy on, helping entrepreneurs find accomplices and not just allies. And, I'd love to hear a little bit about, what that means and why you think it's so important.
Yeah, something that I wouldn't say that I invented. One of my founders in one of my accelerator programs, I was interviewing her at one point, and she said, I'm not looking for more allies. I have a lot of allies. I need more accomplices. And kind of what she meant by that, and what has struck me about that, is that you really need people who are not just supportive and cheerleaders, but people who are actually going to roll up their sleeves, right? And I think what strikes me about a lot of initiatives, even some of the ones that I see at my own company that are for racial equity or equity within the ecosystem, they're led by people who are oftentimes representative of that community. And what we need are more people who are not necessarily representative of that community, still rolling up their sleeves, right? And not just being cheerleaders, but taking a role in equality, right? Even when it's not in their own personal interest, right? So for me, that's something I've just, is the current mantra for a lot of my programs. When I'm recruiting folks to mentor startups or recruiting folks to support the founders in my programs, it's how can we have more accomplices and not just allies? Because allyship is sometimes fickle, right? We have a lot of allies that sometimes disappear when you need them most, right? So how can you have more accomplices in your journey that are gonna get their hands dirty?
Yeah, I love that idea of moving beyond your own interest and really investing. And I think even Jackson referenced that, is like when it's tied to your value system and there's a dedicated focus and you're in it together, it's a very different mode of operating than being with you. In it is different than with you. It's kind of, I love that construct. Tam, I think, I want to not necessarily shift gears, but I think it's incumbent upon us to recognize that this pandemic has, acutely affected everything that we're talking about here. And, of course, diversity, inclusion, equity has come to the forefront. It's about time. But I think, I'd love to hear, we've heard from Jackson around diversity initiatives and what this Jason talked about accomplishes. But what do you think is the biggest challenges facing Black entrepreneurs today? And, what are your comments there?
So whenever I'm asked this question, I hope one day to have a new answer. Unfortunately, it's the same old answer. It is access to capital. Mm-hmm. And I wish it was different. I wish it was more nuanced. I wish it was more complex. And the pandemic highlighted and exacerbated some existing problems and troubles that Black business face in the United States. There were problems that already existed, but they just highlighted them even more, as you just said earlier. So, and access to capital appears in several different ways, right? Because it's not as simply put as some of my traditional bankers would have you see, is that it's just that Black people don't have access to credit, or they're not money smart, financially literate. And it's really not that simple. Given when all things are equal, their financial literacy, their credit scores, their expertise, they still are more likely to get a loan that's underfunded than their white counterparts. That is systemic racism. That's the very definition of such. And again, I wish I had a better answer for you, but that is the biggest problem. If you start off being underfunded from start, you can imagine the impacts from your business from here on out. You're always playing catch up, even when you are the best at what you do. So that's the first problem. The other problem is that they're not seen the same way. So even though they may get into certain rooms, I think the previous conversation talked about that, and I love that conversation because they were talking about building their own table. Mm-hmm. And so they're not seen as viable. And again, that's bias and racism at play. And I don't mean to be harsh in my criticism, but it's just the facts. And until we get those accomplices and those allies working together with us, and I would venture to disagree just slightly, it is in their best interest. If you raise everyone up, it's ultimately all of humanity. And it may not directly seem like it is, but it really is.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. And I'm going to go back to Jackson, because you talked a little bit about, really a concerted effort around, $100 million fund from Salesforce Ventures, which ties back to Tam's comment about access to capital and getting it out there and having these founders be seen. So, talk a little bit about that and the push at Salesforce, around this dedicated fund and how you're gaining some traction around it.
Yeah, no, definitely, Tam. And I think you highlighted a really important point, is that capital piece. And I think a lot of VCs like to open up office hours. I think office hours are great, but I think at the end of the day, it's can you write the check and be a sponsor and supporter going forward. And so, and as part of that $100 million, here at Salesforce, it's not, and back to the point that you made earlier, it's not a separate fund. It's part of our core investment portfolio. So it's, when you get a check from Salesforce Ventures, you're part of our portfolio. There is some intentionality around it, though, and we are working with other organizations, a whole host that I can name, from Black Women Talk Tech to Culture Shifting Labs to TechCrunch includes a whole host of others that are really great organizations. And so part of how we look at that pool of capital, yes, there's some intentionality, but it is a part of our core investment practice. Even how we think about our diligence, how we think about the teams that we're backing, and how we're thinking about from a legal perspective, code of conduct. I think it's more of a holistic approach, but it is some intentional capital, and it is, we are backing some phenomenal founders. I guess for our team, we really do focus on B2B software, and so being able to find founders in the B2B software space that have, starting to approach that product market fit on the earlier side. That still hasn't changed. We're still going after, roughly the same companies. We're going a bit earlier, but I think it's still that intentionality, kind of holistically how we're thinking about investment. And Tam, to your point, that access to capital is so important. And I believe vehemently that as more investors of color, more Black and Latinx, investors and VCs come to the table, I think that they're, naturally their networks are more diverse, which will lead to more investment into founders of color. And so, I'm a board member over at Black VC, and really our core, kind of thesis and mission is to increase the number of Black investors in the VC ecosystem. I think that's a big component too that I think we all need to, kind of understand as well, because where the capital is being allocated from is one important piece of the puzzle too.
So great. And I love the point about intentional capital, but all of the other support and all of the decisions that, Salesforce is making is aligned with the philosophy all along. Jason, maybe you could comment a little this idea of, certainly there's this idea of writing checks, but, through your role in running accelerator programs, there's, additional work that could help Black founders be seen, to Tam's point. So, maybe you could comment a little bit on, what you've done through through the accelerator program at Google and how it's specifically focused on Black founders.
Yeah, so I will say I still do fundamentally believe that all of this is with the goal of getting access to capital. So everything that we're doing is just to create more visibility, streamline their operations, extend their runway. But truly, the idea is in the North Star is how do you get them more funding, right? So that said, what does Google do best? And that's kind of my mantra again when I'm designing programs is Google creates visibility. We can pretty much access anyone through our platforms in the world, right? But then secondarily, technology, right? So we're really and it's no surprise that the Black community also has had a lack of access to a lot of STEM resources, right, as well. So how can we bring what we do best, whether it's data management, machine learning, those types of topics to these founders and supplement them so that they can go on and fundraise and be more successful in that and have the credibility and also have the visibility, right, to reach investors. So it's still the same. I agree with Tam and Jackson. It's still the same North Star, right? How do you create access to capital? But it's also through what we're positioned to do best, right, as a Google and as a company.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I know, Tam, through your role at the Black Chamber of Commerce, you're also looking at ways to kind of inject other support into the community, perhaps as building blocks for fundraising. But maybe you could comment a little bit about what you're doing, and then we can jump to the future on what you guys see.
Yeah, there are a lot of different ways that we've done that, and we've partnered with Google over the years, and we have a long-standing history, and a lot of the big techs. Companies, and I'm proud of those relationships where it may not be direct capital, back to an earlier point I made, but it's positioning business owners and entrepreneurs with the tools they need to get to the profitability margins that they wish. Mm-hmm. So one of our new programs that we're rolling out is a CPG accelerator. We have a lot of Black-owned businesses that are in that CPG space. We also know that we dominate in terms of what our spending power is, but we don't match with what our revenue and earning power is in those spaces. So we're trying to take some companies that have a high growth yield rate that we're able to get them to the next level. So we're excited. We will be calling back on our tech partners to help us flesh out the program and make certain that we're offering them high quality programs to get them to the next level. So our goal is to take 10 to 15 companies within the next few years and help them double their revenue. So those are things that we work on, but I think that it takes all, again, like I said, we might start it, but we'll tap on, hey, Google, can you help us figure out how do they get the data and the information, or whoever it is. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Jason, but, and Jackson, I've got something for you too, just don't you worry. Yeah, we just make certain that they have access to tools to help small business grow.
Yeah. The focus on community values, village, takes a village, all applies in this construct. Before we go to some audience Q&A, I just want to kind of look ahead to the future and maybe each of you can comment on kind of what is your vision for this conversation, and what do you think what do you hope for the progress to be, looking out 3 to 5 years and how this conversation might shift. Maybe we'll start with you, Jackson, on what you think.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll jump in. I mean, I think, it feels like every other week we have another Black, founder raising a substantial round of fundraising. We have, more recently a few Black unicorns as well. And I think over time, as you see more examples of Black unicorns and Black companies going public, more significant rounds, I think, broadly across the ecosystem, it's not a situation where, that there's not a lack of talent or lack of companies. I think you start to see some more examples of successful exits. I think that will continue to catalyze the conversation. I think as there continues to be more diverse VCs in the seat that can write checks, step in and lead a Series A, lead a Series B, take a board seat, help the company become successful. That's only going to continue to see the success of these companies as well. And so I think over time, we're starting to chip away, and I think the conversation will look completely different in 3 to 5 years' time, 100%.
Yeah, I love this idea of, as you increase, the saying of you can't be what you can't see. But if you shift that and the visibility, of more unicorns, more investors, more founders, more people getting in, even starting at the groundwork, you can really change that. Jason, what might you add, or what might be your hope for the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, my hope is that kind of the last year and looking forward the next few years has left everyone feeling activated and engaged. And I hope that no one in 5 years can say, I don't know how to help, right? Whether it's through mentorship or angel investing or whatever it is, right? Digital marketing, coaching, anything, right? Like people feel activated and that they feel like they know how to help, and that can create that momentum, that inertia to kind of make it sustainable, right? Because I think we're in a unique opportunity where there are so many ways now that people can get activated. So I just want to activate as many people as possible, honestly.
Yeah, raise your hand for help. And Tam, what's your hope?
Oh, I love both of the answers. I think it's just a combination of both of them. I am hopeful that when I'm asked that question again about what's the biggest problem facing Black business, I can point that we've made a significant dent and relieving access to capital, and some of the programs that both of the gentlemen are involved in will most certainly help. And even Deloitte, the board leadership training is huge, right? Getting more voices, as Jackson said, diverse voices on boards, in public and private boards, is huge. It really changes the landscape of things.
Awesome. Great. Well, we have a few minutes for some audience questions. So hopefully people have entered those in, and I'm just going to our chat to pull those up. It doesn't look like we have any questions yet. We might have just a minute or two for a few more comments from each of you, and some words of wisdom given the audience that we have here. What advice might you say, maybe in something that's really memorable in a pithy way, to like what should people be doing right now as they listen to this conversation? Because we have a great representation here of big tech, investor, and a group that really supports founders. Who wants to comment a little bit on, a piece of advice on what they can do right now, founders can do right now?
I think now is the time to be bold. There are so many, as Jackson was saying, there's so many people that are paying attention right now, and they are opening up new funds, they're opening up new programs. Capitalize on it. Don't be shameless, be bold. I'd say now is the time to be a little bit shameless, right? So I'd say that would be the one thing. If you take nothing else away, just have that biased action and be a little bit shameless about it.
Oh, Jason, I couldn't agree with you more. We have a saying that's floating around my chamber now is live like you're retiring. Professionally, live like you're retiring. And my young staff has gotten so confused. They're asking all people who are about to retire. And that's not what I mean. I mean, what chances would you take if you no longer were working again? How bold would you be? What decisions? Like, it frees your mind to open up in just such a different capacity. And Yeah. So I agree with you. Now is the time. If not now, when? So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jackson.
No worries, no worries. I guess just like two final points, and nothing crazy out there, but I think at the end of the day, you can't make somebody do something that they don't want to do, and oftentimes as founders, your time is your most precious resource, right? And so just be conscious of who you're working with and the partners you want to bring to the table, and you can't convince somebody to do something they don't want to do. And then I guess the second point here that I'll just mention is I'm just so excited about kind of the innovation and where we are today, and I think we're still in the early innings. So if you're a founder, if you're a VC, there's still a lot of innovation to be made and a lot of companies to be built. So just really encouraged about the next 5-10 year horizon, and I'll be present. So look forward to meeting some of you guys in the audience too.
Yeah, I love that. I just want, I recognize there are a few questions came in, and I know we have just a couple minutes. But, there was a question about how do you actually, plug into some of these programs that are mentioned? Is there, are there some, tips that you guys would, reference, some sources of information?
Very basic one for me. You can follow or add me or email me at any point. I'm always happy to help. And I think there are a lot of people who are willing to do so. So I know I would say follow each other. It takes a community, and people are sharing these resources quite often.
Great. Any other final comments, Tam, Jackson, that you wanted to add? Okay. Well, I just want to thank you all. It's evident that we're starting this flywheel, and as you all commented about your optimistic vision 3 to 5 years from now, the conversation is ready to be changed. And Jason, Jackson, and Tam, I want to thank you for everything you're doing through your respective roles and beyond, through some of your other work. And it's been a privilege to kind of have this conversation, and let's hope when we reconvene, hopefully in person with this audience and this community in the next several years, we'll have so many more success stories to share about the impact that Black investors, founders, and entrepreneurs are making in the world. Thank you so much.